Well, good evening. This is Malcolm Keefe from the Graphic Communication Education Association, and I welcome you to our webinar series. And tonight we have Dr. John Leininger from Clemson University, and we're very pleased that he's joining us tonight and is going to teach us all about mailing. So, John, I'm going to turn it over to you. I'm going to stop my screen sharing, and I think you will have to probably click into screen sharing, but welcome and thanks for joining us tonight.
I appreciate the opportunity, and I am turning my screen on, so I now have control, and you should see my slides.
Yes, we do.
Okay, so ultimately, what I am trying to talk about today is why should you, as a teacher in this field, be teaching mail? I have a couple good points I'll get to. The one thing I would tell you is a lot of people, even in the industry, they've been burnt by doing mail wrong. They've lost the discounts. They've had to pay penalties. So basically, the undertone of what this is all about is feel the fear and do it anyway. Because I will tell you, I am actually delivering 3 different mailings to the post office tomorrow. And I have done quite a few mailings over the years, but I still sweat bullets that I have done everything right, because it's hard to see what's going on. So you really have to be critical about crossing your T's and dotting your I's. And you'll understand why as we go a little bit further through this and I show you some good examples. So, okay. Why should you be learning about mailing? Well, I have heard this in many different industry trade groups that have said this, and the biggest one that I've heard is Infotrends that said that's sort of the research arm of our industry. And they say that over 50% of everything that gets printed goes in the mail at some point. Now, we're not just talking about direct mail. We're talking about a catalog that goes into a box along with a product that's being sold. We're talking about maybe a manual that goes along with a product that's going to go into and be shipped someplace. So when we're talking about mail, we're not just talking about the USPS. We're also talking about FedEx and all the others. But when you look at how much gets printed and what goes into the mail, they're basically stating that it's somewhere around 50% or more that goes in. Now, I have a department chair that says, prove it. Find that for me written down. And I've tried to go back to those trade associations that have said that and asked for them to show it to me, and they can't do it. So I basically have to deal with this debate in a different way. So here's my comeback. It's the third bullet. It says that the USPS mails over 500 million pieces of mail every day. And these are 2017 figures, but it's been going on for the last so many years. I mean, I've been watching it for 10 years, and it's dropped. It was higher than that in the past, so it's gone down a little bit lower, but it's not gone underneath 500 million a day, and that's 6 days a week. So understanding that's an awful lot of mail when you add it up over a year. And the thing I always try to point out is all 500 million of those basically has a printed piece in it. So that's an awful lot of mailing as far as being processed, an awful lot of printing. The other thing is, I just wonder how many tax dollars do you think that the post office uses each year? I mean, how much does it cost us as citizens to help defray the cost of the post office and all the mailing we do? It is zero, not a penny. Nada. They have not gotten any money from the federal government for over 30 years. But I don't have this written down here, but the federal government has stolen money from them. I'm sorry, I'm probably being a little liberal with my term, but the reality is that the government came up with this brilliant idea about 10 years ago and said, what we're going to start having federal agencies do is we're going to have them start prepaying retirees' health care so that it's already done and we don't have to worry about it. It's already been paid. So the post office has been doing that for over 10 years at a tune of about $2 billion a year. And about 5, maybe 6 years ago, they started going in the red by about $2 billion a year. They'd been paying it for 5 years before that. Now, you can sit there and say, well, that makes sense. Why shouldn't they do that? Well, why do you prepay somebody's health care and you just don't just keep paying it when they're retired? I mean, that's what you're doing. You're absorbing that. And then the other side is the Congress never made any other federal agency do that. And Congress has started taking money out of that account and using it for other things. That's why I said they steal the money, because they haven't put it back. And if they could give back the post office all the money that they've taken over the years, the post office could balance its budget, and they could buy a whole lot of new equipment, and they could keep things progressing. Basically, the technology, they could keep moving it forward. They are already very technologically sound. So postage is typically more than you print, and you need to do it right or you lose your profits. So on an average job, the postage is generally about 25 to 27% of the cost of the job. Now, I have to clarify that's average. If I was doing a 32-page booklet and mailing that as an annual report or something along those lines, that's not going to be a true thing. The postage is up a little bit more, but there's a lot more cost in that. But if I'm talking about a postcard, or I'm talking about a mailing that has an envelope and maybe one or two things put in the envelope and is sealed, the postage is generally about 25 to 27% of the cost of doing that job. The printing is usually about 25% of the cost of doing the job. So the postage is always a little bit more than the print typically is. So you need to recognize that if you mess up the mail, you're going to eat the job. If you don't get your postage discounts, you're going to have to pay more. If you make a mistake in processing the mail, the customer doesn't pay more, you pay more. It's your fault, you pay more. So you want to make sure that you're doing everything right, or you lose your discounts. And you'll understand in a few slides how significant a discount that really is. So one of the first things I tell anybody that's starting to think about getting involved in mailing, whether you're a teacher, whether you're a printer, whether you're a mail house, whether you're a church, it doesn't matter. If you're going to start doing your own mailing, one of the things you need to do is you need to recognize that the post office can be your best friend or can be your worst nightmare. And it has a lot to do with the way you're approaching them. The first time I got involved, I was actually involved in IGAA, the precursor to GCEA, and I was the secretary. And I had to do, at that time, we were doing probably about 12 to 15 mailings a year. So I went to the post office to get my nonprofit indicia so that I could mail from where I lived in Charlotte at the time. And I went in and I made this was my big mistake. I said to the postmaster, I'm actually talking to the postmaster, and I said to the postmaster, I realize this is just a formality. And she looked at me and she said, it's not a formality, it's totally my decision. And that's not really a true statement, it's not her decision. She can't stop me from getting the nonprofit, but she made me fill out every single piece of paperwork. She had it reviewed. It took 3.5 months to get approved, where it should have been just a week or 2 weeks. So I made an enemy, and I didn't even know I was doing it right off the bat. So how do you make sure that they're on the team? I want to treat them with respect, recognize that it is their world, and you're the one that's coming into it and visiting every time you need to drop off mail. So be nice to them, take care of them, and treat them with respect. So critical elements that you need to understand about mailing. The very first thing is data is super critical. Now, it's not just, as far as the post office concerns, the only important data is their mailing address. Well, for us, it's much more if we're in the printing side, because we're going to try to use variable data to personalize the piece, to use appropriate photographs, to make sure it's going to the right place at the right time. So those are all different things that you have to do with data. The thing about the data now is, now that printers are doing this on digital devices, so the postcards, I just did 3 different mailings of 1,000 postcards going out to a project my students are working on. And each one of them is a totally separate mailing. But the reality is I printed them on a digital press, so I addressed them at the same time that I printed them. The thing that's so different than what we used to do 10, 15 years ago in the print industry is we used to print on pre-printed shells. So we'd print the process color. We would send the job to a mail house. They would take an inkjet machine, and they would inkjet the address on it. Well, now we have to process all the data ourselves as a printer, process it properly, and then you have to print it in the proper distribution order for the post office. Because the reason you get discounts from the post office is because you save them work. The average piece of mail, so here I am, I'm in Clemson, South Carolina. Malcolm's in California. If I went today and left work here and I put something in the mail and hand addressed it, put a 50-cent stamp on it, dropped it in the mailbox in front of the post office, That would go, they would pick it up, they would take it to Greenville, South Carolina. They would run it through one machine in Greenville, South Carolina. They'd say, this is going to go to a main facility in California. When it gets to the main facility in California, at that main facility, it would probably run through at least 2, possibly 3 machines. Then it would go to a subsection, a subgroup. I'm not going to get into all the acronyms on you today, but they would get into sort of a more central one that might be covering maybe 1/10 of California. And then that would get processed there probably once, at least once, maybe twice. And then it goes to the local post office and it's processed one more time. So the mail is going to handle it probably, typically it's going to be, if it's across the country, it's going to be 4 to 6 times. So if, on the other hand, I was mailing 150 pieces to Malcolm's zip code area, so I was mailing just to San Luis Obispo, and that was the only place it was going, and I had 1 full tray of mail, and I was mailing it as Clemson University in a nonprofit status, I'd be able to mail that for 8.8 cents. Now, why can I do that? Because I would be putting it in a tray that is only going to get handled. It's going to be shipped all the way to California, but they're going to open it one time and put it through one machine at the local post office because I put in a tray that all the pieces in that mail went there. Now, that's the biggest, that is the absolute maximum because you're in a 5-digit zip code sort, and that's the best discount I can get. Now, I had to do a lot of things to get that discount. I had to make sure the addresses were properly done. I had to make sure there weren't any bad addresses in there. I had to make sure that I formatted it right. I had to add a barcode to it. So I had to do some work to make this work right, and that's why the post office calls it work sharing. So when I did all the work that saved them handling it 5, maybe 6 times, and they only had to handle it once, then they're going to give me a discount because I saved them a lot of time and a lot of equipment time on their machines. So that being said, I need to get all the data right before I ever prepare the mailing. The data has to be properly prepared for the data that it can be printed, and you also have to understand the rules and exceptions that have to be taken into account so that all production issues are done. In other words, size of the type, how big can the barcode? The barcode has a minimum and a maximum size. You can't have it too angled. You got to have enough contrast between the background of the paper and the type. And there's all these different things. We'll go over some of them as we go through this presentation, but you got to understand all of those different rules to get the right discounts. And then the USPS mail processing requirements have to be addressed before it can be printed. For example, where are you placing the address? You can't, on a letter, you can't have the address any higher than 4 3/4 of it from the bottom of the envelope, anywhere. Not one little piece, not the barcode, not the person's name, not the street address, not the city, state, or zip. Everything has to be below 4 3/4, and it also can't be in the bottom. It's the bottom 3/8 of an inch. It can't be in the bottom 3/8 of an inch. And it can only be so close to the right and on the left, and then it has to be shaped properly. So there's all these different things that we're going to cover here over this next period of time. And then proper coding must be planned into the production of the printed piece before it can be printed. So again, the barcode. Right now you have to use an intelligent mail barcode. There's 2 levels. There's basic service, and then there's also what they call full service. And with full service, you end up getting a 3-cent discount on every 1,000. That's not very much, but it's still 3 cents per 1,000. So I saved 3 cents on my 1,000-piece mailing that I just sent out today because I got all of this done for them, and I used full service barcode. Yes, but if you're doing 10 million mailing pieces, that ends up to be a significant chunk of money. So keep that in mind. I always tell a funny story. My dad, when he was 85, I told him I'm teaching a class in mailing, and he starts laughing his head off, and he goes, "You teach a class on how to lick a stamp and stick it on an envelope?" And I said, "No, Dad. I teach a class on how someone preparing the mail can save 2 cents, and it's a 10 million mailing piece. That's big dollars, and that's what I teach people to do." All right, the last thing was the customer or the ad or design agency has to know the USPS rules before they quote a price. You need to understand that breaking the rules, you'll likely result in losing discounts and getting mailing penalties tacked on, and I'll talk about those in a couple of slides. The important thing that you have to understand is a lot of designers design things that don't go through the mail well. it was in 2007 that they started to really penalize people if they mailed a square mail piece. It cost you cannot get a discount with a square mail piece, and you pay a surcharge of 21 cents a piece. And yet you still have designers that are designing square mail pieces. You can take a square card if you think it really is an advantage, and you just put it in a rectangular envelope. They actually make envelopes that have a little like sleeve inside it, so it fits in just right if you want to do that, so that you still get the discount, but you get to have that square piece. I did it one time with a designer on campus, and they were showing a piece they did for one of the deans, and it was square, and I said, you shouldn't do it like this anymore. They changed that, and they said, oh, we find we get better response rates. I just looked at them and I said, no, you don't. I said, I read every case study that's written on anything like this, and there's never been a case study to prove or disprove that you get better results with a square mail piece. And I can tell you that that's not going to make somebody open an envelope first. So anyhow, if they want to prove it, they got to do a study and they got to do a test. And so far, it's never been done. I suppose that could be a research project next semester for me. Other issues to consider: where do you tab it closed, and how many tabs do you use? And where does the closed edge have to be if it's a folded piece? It was interesting. I got my GCEA communicator just yesterday. I got it, and I was looking at it to see if they had all the tabs they needed, and they actually had one more tab than they needed. So over tabbing is never a problem. They're never going to stop you, but understanding exactly where your tabs go and how many you need to qualify for the post office, that's all you need to do. And I don't have it tied in here. I do have one slide that shows a little bit of it, but I do have at the very end of this presentation, I have a whole slide full of links. So I'm going to make it so you can get a PDF of this. You open up that PDF, and I will tell you, I checked every single one of those links last night. A couple of them broke. The post office no longer uses RIB, so I had to find the pages again. But every one of them, as of today, works fine. So if you were to open up every single one and bookmark it, those are what I consider very critical links to find some things to be successful in mailing. The post office's webpage is probably the largest webpage I have ever been in my entire life. I've never seen a more complicated, more pages in there, more connections, more data, historical, everything. And once you find something, it's almost impossible to find it again. So once you find something, bookmark it. And that's what I did. And I'm sharing you these, what I consider significant bookmarks. Second point on this one up here, the second bullet point is, does it go first class or standard? Why is that important? Well, if I go first class, I can get a discount for preparing my mail. But just to give you a sense again, we are mailing this postcard that I just did for the local, and it's only $29631. Instead of 50 cents, we're getting to mail it for 22 cents because we're delivering a tray of mail right to the post office, right to the branch of the post office that's going to mail it. So I get a DCFF discount, which means they don't even have to ship it to Greenville and ship it back. They just take it in the back room and store it, and it's all done. So they save a lot of time, money. They don't even spend any gas. But I have to deliver it right to that building to get that discount. So I'm down to 22 cents, and they're going to run it through one machine, and then it's going to be delivered. Now, that was for a business rate, not a nonprofit, because we were doing this it was a student project, but we were doing it for a restaurant in the area of Clemson. And so, we couldn't use the nonprofit. We couldn't use Clemson because it was for a business that was making money. So that was a standard mail, though. That was not first class mail. First class mail only would have gotten it down to about 45 or 43 cents. So you get a big one. Why? Because standard mail, they can hold the mail for up to 9 days. Delivery is typically 2 to 9 days. So you get up a little bit. I have never, ever had I've never had standard mail held for 9 days. I would suppose at Christmas time something might happen, but it's never been more than a few days. The post office is actually pretty good about it. With the one that we're mailing, we're bringing it to the post office on Friday. They won't process it on Saturday, but they will it on Monday. So it will be in the mail on Monday. It will be delivered to people's houses on Monday. So you can call that 2 days if you want, but the Sunday's not a regular day, and they just don't process the mail locally on Mondays. So I'm sorry, on Saturdays. They still deliver it because it comes sorted from the headquarters. All right, if you lose a printed sheet when you're doing this, so we printed up, again, it was 3 runs of 1,000, so we printed up 1,000 postcards. Now, we didn't run it through a folder, but let's say I ruined some postcards in cutting them down on the paper cutter. Well, if you lose them, you got to replace them. You also are losing, basically, if you look at every piece, is the cost of printing it, the cost of the paper. You could be losing anywhere from 5 to 10 cents a piece, depending upon how much is already invested in it. So you really have to recognize that you want to keep all those in there. And so basically you want to reprint it. But more importantly, that if you don't replace the lost sheets and a problem occurs and the post office says you haven't got the right number of pieces of mail in here, or it's in the wrong order, or there are not enough pieces in the tray, you can lose all your mailing discounts. And again, in a few minutes, you'll see how massive a discount that can be. I mean, keep in mind, I told you that we were mailing this 1,000 out at 22 cents a piece times 1,000. So that's basically $222. Okay. I'm sorry, it gives me $220. It's $220. So it would have been $500. So because we prepped the mail and understood how to do it, we were able to save these companies that, the restaurants are paying for the mailing. That's the only thing they're paying for. I got the printing donated. I got the paper donated. I got the software donated to do all this. So it's a research project for my students, but the postage needed to be paid for, and that's what the local companies, they're also giving away the free food. Got money invested. Okay.
Hey, John, can I ask you a quick question?
Sure.
Yeah, so you mentioned if you lose a printed sheet, you risk, not hitting the minimums and losing your discounts.
Right.
So what is the best practice on that? I mean, is it just that they track every single piece, or does anybody ever throw a few pieces in there to, kind of fudge for that, or how does that work?
Well, they would know if there were more mailing pieces than there were, but what generally happens is they run it through a machine called Merlin. It's an acronym. I apologize. I can't remember off the top of my head what Merlin stands for. But they'll run your tray of mail, or like let's say you have 50 trays of mail. They have a formula that changes each day that they're going to take it from the second skid, third level down the right-hand tray. They run that through, and Merlin scans the address, figures out what the barcode should be, and then looks at the barcode. And if it can't read the barcode, then it's a bad piece of mail. If the barcode's too angled, it's a bad piece of mail. If the address is incomplete, if the address doesn't exist, if the address is an old address, all these different things, they may go wrong. It's not one thing that kicks it out, Merlin, but if there's enough things that are wrong, Merlin's going to kick it out, and they shut down the entire run. So you never know which tray they're going to do. Now, mine's 1,000 pieces. If they pulled one of my trays out, they'd run the entire tray through to make sure that every single piece in that tray belonged in that tray. And if I was off by a certain percentage, it's a very small percentage, by the way, then they would just renege all of my discounts. Now, what they do in today's world is they don't just stop the mail. They just go to your account and take off the rest of the money that they gave you the discounts. They take the discounts away and take your money. Mm-hmm. So it can really be very costly if you do it. So ultimately, what I do is, so I'm, again, I don't do this enough. I'm always very cautious. I've had the students make mistakes and I have to fix things. I always hide the piece number. On every single piece, I usually do it in like 4-point type, so I'd have to use a magnifying glass to see it. But I put a tray number on it, so every tray has a number in it. And I put like T, so like one of mine is T19 today. So I put T19 hyphen, and then every single data field, every single record, I put a number in it, from 1 to 1,000 in this case. And so if we dump the tray out, I'd be able to sort it back and get it in the right order. So if I have a mail piece that goes out, and let's say I ruin a mail piece in the folder, I'll just stand the mail piece up right before it or right after it, and then I'll give the torn or the messed up piece back to the digital press operator. They'll reprint it. You'll typically fold that one by hand and put it right back in where it was supposed to be. So you have to keep track of it. So the chances of losing your discounts, it's like a lot of things. I mean, how often do you speed and you never get stopped? But how bad do you feel when you speed and then you get that $180 ticket? And so every once in a while, you're going to get caught. And so the big thing with the post office is I don't like to agitate the bear, you know? So I follow the rules precisely and hope that someday if I make a mistake that's, you know, just an oversight or a mistake, that they'd actually grant me a little plea bargaining there. But if you're making mistakes all the time, you can do it. By the way, there's another thing that's happening. This is much more advanced, but you actually have what they call a mailer scorecard now. And a mailer scorecard, they keep track of all this stuff. It's almost like your bowling average. And so every time something goes wrong with a mail piece, and some of them are insignificant, little thing, they're not going to come back and charge you, but they put it on your scorecard. And if after 3 months you've got too many marks against you, you start losing your discounts. So they're getting better at it because they're tracking everything now more and more, because that intelligent mail barcode is totally trackable. Wait till you see the slide I show you about the intelligent mail barcode, and you'll understand. It's one of those mixed blessing things. It's great, allows them to do certain things, but also allows them to track every single thing you've done wrong in a real easy way. All right, so some key points. Everything that I talked about, you have to do before you even print the job, okay? And if it doesn't work, it's now the printer's problem, not the mail house that you sent it to. So the printer really needs to take ownership in this. I know a couple of printers have gotten burned where they did something wrong and they lost the discounts and it cost them $10,000. You can't go back to the customer and say, hey, I'm really sorry. I screwed up the mailing and it costs more. I need another $10,000. That printer ate that. They ate that $10,000. Now keep in mind, I told you how much the mailing is and how much the cost of printing is. That means they didn't just lose the profit. They paid, and they paid all the paper. They lost all the paper costs, all the printing costs, all the labor costs, everything. So the bottom line is you don't want to have those type of things happen, so you need to protect it. There was a big mailer in Atlanta that was doing a job, and it was a 10 million mailing piece, and they did one thing wrong, and they were charged $2 million for their mistake. $2 million for their mistake. So now when you go into that company, they told us all about this on a tour I was taking there. When you go into that company, they have this one spot in the whole mailing process. 3 people have to look at it and sign off on it. And it's that one spot that they missed. They'll never, ever do that again. But they ate that $2 million. So that took it right out of their profit for that year. They lost $2 million in profit. Now, I mean, that was a huge company that was, $1 billion a year in printing and stuff, but in mailing. So, but it's still $2 million that the post office got. And the post office did the extra work because the job was done wrong. So the post office should get their money. But the reality is they didn't need it because they could have mailed it more efficiently if the customer had done their job. All right. Two or three to focus on here that the whole rest of this presentation is going to be about is mail piece design and the format of the mail piece and following the rules for addressing and preparing the mail to be processed. First thing we're going to talk about is some of the costs here. Now, the year was 2007. It's hard for me to believe I've been dealing with mail for well over 10 years now. So I'd been dealing with it for a couple of years before they made all these changes. But the year from when they went into 2008, they changed the way they did mail. If you take a look at this, a letter, so I'm looking at the left-hand side here. So a 1 ounce letter was 39 cents to mail in 2007. A flat, so a letter is basically anything 6.5 to 11.5. Can't be any bigger than that. And a flat is anything longer than either of those dimensions or up to 12 by 15, and then a parcel is a little box. And notice that a flat and a parcel were exactly the same amount, and notice that they weren't significantly higher than a letter was. And look at 2 ounces, they were all the same price. That's absolutely, that's ridiculous. If you, even back then and still today, they can handle a lot more letters a lot faster than they can handle flats or parcels. So for them all to be the same price, that's crazy. At 3 ounces, they were same price. At 4 ounces, they were the same price. If you look at today, over here on the right-hand side, the prices went up on January 21st, 2018. So it went up to 50 cents, $1 for a flat, and $3.50 for a parcel. A letter is 21 cents more for the 2nd ounce, so 71, and then 120. And notice now the parcels are all $3.50. So it's the same to mail a parcel, whether it's 1 ounce, 2 ounce, 3 ounce, or 4 ounces. Okay, but for a letter, you can see it keeps going up for a letter. Okay, and for a flat, it's more expensive all the way across. It's basically twice as expensive for the 1 ounce, not quite twice as expensive for the others, and the difference is smaller as you get to the 3.5 and the 4 ounces. Again, you can't do a flat, you can't do a letter, so 3.6 ounces can't be mailed as a letter anymore, or a letter with first class mail. Can be in standard, not in first class. But a flat, the breaking point is 4 ounces. That's just something they do. And notice the postcard is 35 cents now. It was 24 back then. There's no discounts for postcard when you mail them in bulk. When you mail a postcard in bulk, it's the same thing as mailing a letter. So it's cheaper to mail a letter when I get the discounts than putting a 35-cent stamp on all the letters. So most people, once they get over a 4x6, or if they're going to do any more than if they're going to do more than 200, that's the minimum amount to get a discount on. If they're going to do more than 200, they're going to mail it as a letter instead of a postcard. It still looks like a postcard. Still has the advantage as a postcard. What's the advantage of a postcard? The message is on the outside. The DMA, Direct Marketing Association, I'm sorry, they rebranded. I don't remember their new name. But that group has been studying mail for years and years and years. And they found that people read postcards before they read anything else in the mail. Reason for that is the message is on the outside. By the time you're walking back from the mailbox and you picked up the mail, the postcard you've already looked at because it wasn't in an envelope and you couldn't walk and tear the envelopes open, not drop everything else. So the postcard is number one thing that people look at. By the way, I'm making reference here in the bottom to the USPS price list. It's on page 5. If you just type into your browser, USPS Notice 123, you will get their price list. That has been a standard since I've been looking at mailing, which honestly I think goes back more like 18 years that I've been studying mailing. So this is a little caveat at the bottom. So if you do not create a letter that's machinable, if they cannot run it through their machines and someone has to actually pick it up with their hands, read it, and then literally type in the zip code, and then it puts a barcode on it for you, you get no discounts, and you pay, if you look over here on the right, you pay a 21 surcharge. So instead of mailing it at a discount, like what I said, we mail these postcards at a discount to 22 cents. It costs us 22 cents to mail each one of these 1,000 postcards. I would not be able to mail at 22. I would get no discounts, and I would have a 21% surcharge, 21 cent, not percent, 21 cent surcharge. So I'd have to mail it for 71 cents. Instead of 22 cents, I would have to mail it for 71 cents. Pretty close to 50 cents more. When you look at that, that's more than 3 times what I ended up mailing it for because I didn't make it machinable. So that's why you want to pay attention to the rules. Large envelopes that are rigid, non-rectangular, and not uniformly thick, pay the parcel prices. Remember the previous slide? Parcel price, $3.50 for an ounce. It was 50 cents for an ounce for a letter. You're going to be paying 7 times as much. Card prices applies to single or double postcards when originally mailed. Reply half of postcards must be designated as reply mail for purposes. A little more complicated, but the bottom line is your postcards, you can still get a discount, the 35 cents postcard, even if it's a folded in half postcard as long as it's tabbed. So you can still get that discount. But if I was going to mail a postcard like that to mail more than 200 people, I wouldn't be putting a 35-cent stamp on it. I'd be mailing it as a letter. I'd use an indicia. I'd mail it with standard mail, and I'd be able to mail it for closer to 25, 22 cents a piece. And weights for over 3.5 ounces, unless they're envelopes, cannot go at the first-class letter rate. So just, again, these are just the basic different things you need to understand. Now here's just a comparison so you can see it. If I take 8 pieces of bond paper and I put it into a 9x12 envelope, it's going to mail as a flat. A flat is anything over 6 1/8 by 11.5 inches. So it's going to mail, if you go back a couple of slides and look yourself on the handouts, it's going to mail at $1.42 a piece for a flat. Now, it has to do with weight. So if I take that and I fold everything in half, it's now a 6x9, which is a letter size. Again, I said it had to be smaller than 6 1/8 by 11.5. So 6x9 mails as a letter. Because the weight also drops it down to 2 ounces instead of 3 ounces, which is what the flat was, because the envelope was a little bit heavier. So I'm now mailing it at 2 ounces. So instead of mailing that flat at $1.42, I mailed it for 71 cents. So I ended up cutting my cost in half of mailing this at first class. This is if I do a 1 out, just I'm mailing it to somebody in California. I'm mailing it myself. If I am going to do it by mailing, again, more than 200 pieces in mailing the discounts, instead of mailing at 71 cents, and I'll show you this on the charts in a little bit, I could mail it for 42.4 cents. So this is a 2 ounce letter. I'm mailing at 42.4 cents. Instead of 70.5, that if I was mailing it at flat with the discounts for sorting the flats. I'm still saving 40% on each piece if I went at a mixed AADC. AADC stands for Area Distribution Center. The only company I know that uses acronyms more than the United States Postal Service is Xerox. But I was looking just to double check. I mentioned what an AADC was, and I said it right. And there's actually a PDF that's like 25 pages of acronyms for the post office. It's just it's ridiculous. And every time I'm with postal people, they're rattling them off like a mile a minute, and I just say, what's that one? And so I probably routinely work with about 20 of them, and I know those by heart, but I don't know all of them. So this is a chart for first class mail. And again, the average person, probably you already today are more enlightened, but the average person, if I didn't talk about this, when you do a mailing, everybody thinks, well, everything mails at 50 cents a piece when it's shipped. No, it doesn't. So if you look over here at non-machinable on the right-hand side on this column, they're all mailing for 66.8 cents. And he said, well, I can't put a stamp like that on there. No, this is when I'm mailing 200 or plus more. So again, they add up to the third decimal place, and then it averages out in the end. But the reality is they've got this all figured out. Now, this is broken separate and postmarked separately. So if I had a mailing that had 10,000 pieces in it, and 20 of them are non-machinable, I'd only have to pay that price on that, and then I'd be paying the other prices on the other. So the next column is machinable, but I haven't put a barcode on it. So instead of mailing it at 50 cents, I save basically, I'm saving 3.2 cents because I made it so it could run through their machine. So it has the right proportions, the right thickness, the right dimensions, and the address is going in the right direction, has a return address on it, so I can mail it for a little bit less. But if I automate it, and automated means I have to have a barcode on it, I can mail it. This is a mixed AADC, again, Automated Area Distribution Center. So in the state of South Carolina, I believe there's 6 of these. So these are sort of big hubs where the mail goes to in the big cities. So Greenville's got one, Columbia's got one, Charleston's got one, Florence has got one, and the other, there's 2 others. I'm just not sure where they are. Those are the big ones. And so the bottom line is, if I can get it to that level of a sort, I'm getting to mail it for 42.4 cents. But if I can get it all the way to a 5-digit sort, again, if I'm mailing only to Clemson, South Carolina, only to 29631, every single person on the mailing list, that's what this mailing list that we're dealing with today is with my students, I get to mail it for 37.8, okay? Now, remember, I said this is first class. I said I was mailing for 22. You'll see that one in a slide here in a little bit. Again, I've referenced the page. If you wanted to download it, you can start to do it. It's about a 60-page document with all the pricing because it's pricing every single thing that the post office sells and markets. So here's USPS marketing mail. It used to be called standard mail. Before that, it was called bulk mail. They stopped calling it bulk because it had a very negative term. Before it was bulk mail, it was actually third-class mail. And so they keep changing the names. What they found is most of the people that are mailing in today's world, they're mailing it at standard. They're mailing it for marketing purposes. Now, you can still have a indicia that says standard mail, but marketing is sort of their new trend, what they're trying to do to emphasize it. So over here, I have automation, okay? I have automation. And if you look at that, you can see if I have a mixed ADDC and I have automation and I'm going to do standard mail, I'm getting it for 28.7 cents. If I have a single AADC, which means it's only mail that's going to go out of the Greenville office, then I get it for 27.4. If I have a complete 5-digit sort, then I can mail it for 25.5 cents. Now, I told you I was mailing it at 22, right? So down here, I'm mailing it at 22. Why? If I look over here on the left-hand side, it says DSCF. That's the acronym that they have that defines the local post office that delivers your mail. So the Clemson one. On the front of that building, it says 29631. That is the DSCF. And if I deliver the mail to them, that means it doesn't have to go anyplace else. And they're going to give me the best rate because if you take a look at that 3 cents is what it costs to ship it to Greenville and then ship it back to Clemson, which is stupid. So they know they're saving money doing that. So I get another 3 cents a piece discount on the mail piece. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense to everybody. So I'm just trying to explain understanding how you get your business discounts. Now, over here are some more discounts. So if I'm going to mail to every single person in a specific carrier route, so now I'm getting down to carrier routes. If I'm going to mail to everybody in a carrier route and I delivered it to the local DSCF, I would actually get, this is not nonprofit. This is not first class, but this is regular mail. Any business can do this. I could be mailing my pieces for 15.8 cents. That's how much discount you can get if you know exactly what you're doing and you're maximizing your discounts. Now, not everybody can do that, and you don't always have a mailing that's going to fill up. You have to have at least 150 pieces in one tray to be able to get that discount. Okay? This is nonprofit. So if you take a look at it, so over here I've got mixed AADC, an AADC of 5-digit, then I have basic. Basic means you have to have 75%. 75% of the carrier route has to be filled. And then high density is a little bigger percentage, and then high density plus, and then saturation, you have to have you have to saturate everybody in the carrier route. But if I'm saturating everybody in the carrier route, okay, and I'm doing nonprofit, I can mail it for 8.3 cents a piece if I deliver it to the DCF. If I'm just delivering it to the DNDC, then I get 89 cents a piece. I can get it down to 11 cents if I just let them pick it up.
John, what would keep somebody from doing saturation? Because if they're going to that level of detail anyway, are there just some like lists that aren't clean enough to get to that level?
Well, it's not necessarily clean enough. So, for example, I'm mailing 1,000 pieces, okay? There's 6,119 residential addresses in South Carolina. I know that because we did an Everdoor direct mail, and we actually mailed it to all 6,119 people. I would have to, now in a carrier route, a typical carrier route is going to be somewhere between 300 and 800 people. It depends. If it's an apartment complex, it'll be a higher number because the guy just stands at one box and just puts the mail in. He doesn't have to drive up and down roads. So it really has to do is is it worth doing a saturation mailing? So a lot of times when people doing saturation mailings, they'll do Everdoor direct mail because then you don't have to pay to get the person's name. And then what to do is the person driving around your neighborhood just has a box of every mail piece, and he sticks one of yours in with every one of every other piece. He knows it's going in everybody's mailbox. And you can't get it down to that price, but you can get it down to about 15 cents, but you didn't have to pay for the name. So it has a lot to do with what type of mailing and what you're doing. There aren't too many times that people are doing saturated mail lists. A saturated mail list might be, for example, Duke Power. Everybody gets their electricity basically from Duke Power in my city. So when Duke Power sends out their mail piece, they're getting a saturated rate because they're hitting every single person in every single carrier route. So it's there for people that do that. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But basic, I would have to say the average mailing is going to do well to get a 5 digits hit, which means you have to have at least 150 mail pieces in that 5 digits. And that's a very practical one to get. The others, you have to be doing something special or very local. Okay. So your mail piece design, this is a template to have, and I'll show you, and I'll tell you where you can even get them. You can get them for free. This one I got from someplace else. It just stands out a little bit better. But this dark line that you see that I'm going around with the mouse, this is 6 1/8 inches high, and it's 11 1/2 inches wide. And the mail piece, you see how this sort of funny triangle over on the right-hand side I'm outlining? The top right corner of the mail piece has to fit in there. Otherwise, it doesn't have the right proportions to go through the mail. This is an example of, this is a printing trade association, and they addressed this wrong. They should have turned it sideways and had the address running in the other direction. The post office determines the shape of the piece by the direction that the address is on the mail piece. So this actually mailed as a flat, and it cost twice as much to mail as it should have, just because they designed it wrong. So that's an important one to remember. This is a bad one. I've seen some real bad situations where people do this the wrong way and it costs a lot of money. The other one is, can you mail it first class, or can you mail it USPS marketing mail? There's a link at the bottom of this. You can click on that link. You'll go right to the webpage, and you can download a PDF of this. You can make it up really big, put it up on the wall, and if you're trying to teach the students, it tells you. It's just a, sorry, I forget what kind of chart this is called. It's a flow chart, but it's got a certain name, and I just can't remember it right now. But anyhow, it's sort of a no or no-go. So the first one, is it typewritten or handwritten? If the answer is yes, then it has to go first class, period. That's it. You can't get a discount. You can get a first class discount, but you can't get the marketing mail or standard mail. If the answer is no, then you go over and ask the next question. Is it a bill or a statement? So if it's a bill that you have to pay, or if it's a bank statement and you say yes, then it has to be first class. It has to be first class. If you say no, then you start asking another question. Does it contain personal information? If the answer is no, then it can go to marketing mail. If the answer is yes, you still might be able to go to marketing mail, but you have to answer these other questions. So this is just a flow chart to help you understand what can go through mail, get the discount, and what can't. And I could spend 20 minutes on this, but it's just a really easy reference chart, sort of a yes or no. I think one of the most difficult things with the post office that people have to deal with is that they are getting things confused, and different people at the post office won't give you the same answer. Things to remember early in the mailing process: make friends with a local postmaster, the BMEU. BMU stands for Business Mail Entry Unit. You have to be friends with the staff, treat them nice, treat them with respects, and you should be able to find one in your area on the webpage. Lots of free publications. Paper and ink selection is really important. You can't use the dark ink or neons, dark paper and neon or neon paper. It creates a problem. Size and thickness is critical. It can't be too thin. It can't be too thick. Ink colors are critical. If you do anything with PMS colors, your old PMS colors are basically made of 16 parts. One part has to be black for it to be dark enough to be red. Now, I know that's not true because we did a test because they use red and green lasers. And so we did a test. We used yellow. We used yellow and it didn't see it. But we used blue, and you only needed one part of blue. You didn't need one part of black. So I had something that was so light, but it read every single time. We took it to the post office and they ran it, so we challenged it. But most postal people don't understand color theory very well. So at any rate, the rule of thumb is don't mess with the post office. Just make sure it's at least one part black. And barcodes. Malcolm, I'm inclined to just keep going. I'm probably going to go a little past an hour, but I guess I was ad-libbing a little bit. But I think if anybody is listening, they'd still want to listen, or they could just listen to 2 parts. If you're okay going a little bit over.
Sure.
Okay. So barcodes. Barcodes do not work. It may look cool, but you can't do them in reverse. The devices at the post office can't do it. And then I mentioned Merlin. I should have put that in all caps, but it's an acronym. But Merlin is the deciding factor. They run it through Merlin. If Merlin rejects it, you don't get to argue with Merlin. It's a done deal. You have to go fix whatever's wrong. Things to remember early in the mailing process: join the local postal customer council. I would tell every teacher here you should join the local PCC. They usually have 2-3 meetings a year. They talk about mail design, talk about different things. You get to be friends with someone. You'd be able to get to know the postmaster, get to take a tour. Taking your kids on a tour of the post office, most eye-opening experience. They would never have thought what goes on beyond those walls happens. It's a great experience. But they gotta be personal. If you just call up and say, I want to take my students to visit the post office, they'll say, no, we don't do tours. Once you get to know them, they do tours. They also bring in speakers, and you have a chance to get to know people that work at the post office. And they also have tours. Occasionally, they'll have tours. They don't have a lot of them. which helps you understand the requirements outlined by the USPS. They don't make rules to just make life difficult for yourselves. They make rules so their machines run at full speed. And you all can also volunteer to help at your local PCC, print a newsletter for them one time, host a session with them one time. They're always looking for topics. They've let my students go there and be the photographer, so they feed them for free, and the student ends up taking pictures and then sends them pictures at the end of the day, all sorts of different things. There's also National Postal Forum. The assignment that I told you that my students are doing today is for a contest, and whichever student wins gets, they're getting a free registration in the National Postal Forum, and we're helping to cover their travel and stuff. So they get basically a free trip out to San Antonio this May. And they're really psyched about that. I mean, it's a big thing. I've been able to go to the National Postal Forum for the last 8 years. I've been a speaker, so I get a registration for free. It's a great thing. There's usually about 100 exhibitors, and only one has anything to do with postage. All the rest is how you make your mailing operation more efficient. So it's a really interesting one to go to. These are your basics, your minimum and maximum. So if you mail something that's smaller than 3 or smaller than 5, height smaller than 3 or shorter than 5, it cannot go through the mail equipment. It is unmailable. Not even, can't even mail it with a penalty. It is unmailable. And it needs to be at least 7/1000ths of an inch thick. The maximum for a letter to get, and a letter's a good price, and it processes fast and easy, 6 1/8 inches high, 11.5 wide, and no thicker than 1/4 of an inch. Your postcard's dimension, again, 3.5 by 4.25. 3.5 by 5 is your minimum. 4.25 by 6 is the maximum for a postcard. This if you want to pay 35 cents for a postcard. But again, we printed postcards today. What I'm mailing are 4 by 8 postcards. They have to have an aspect ratio between 1.3 and 2.5. 4 by 8 is an aspect ratio of 2. It's right in the middle. And we're running a 9/1000 thick postcard. It has to be 9/1000 of an inch if you're going for a big mailing. And then a flat, it says the minimum is 6.5 by 11.5. That's not really true. It's basically saying if one of the dimensions is over 6 1/8, I think it's 6.5, I'm sorry, but if it's over 6 1/8 or it's over 11, if either one is over one of those, then it automatically becomes a flat, but neither dimension can be over 12 by 15. The bottom line rules, the minimum is they will not take anything a flat that is smaller than 5 by 6. So you cannot mail a flat that's smaller than 5 by 6. So, and then a flat minimum thickness is 1/4. That's not true. It can be smaller than 1/4. I don't know why that's there. I know it's not true. And then the maximum, though, is 3/4 of an inch. If it's bigger than 3/4 of an inch, then it's a parcel. Addressing issues, fonts, they recommend you use, by the way, the post office has recommendations and it has requirements. The recommendation is that you use a sans serif. But that's really moot point in today's world because all it reads is the barcode now. It doesn't even care. It never looks at it, just double checks. And their optical character recognition can read serifs now anyhow. So it's just sort of an old thing. Again, it needs the contrast, avoid red. PMS colors have to be at least 1 part black. Pastel colors are acceptable with 1 part black in it. Background patterns, like a lot of times in checks, it's a background pattern. That can be a problem if it's in the addressing window. You have to have at least 1/8 of an inch space between the address and any other object. If you have a window, you have to have 1/8 of an inch on the right or left side of the window, and you have to have at least 1/25 of an inch. That's 0.04, the top or bottom. And then the barcode, I'll show you on a slide in a little bit. There's only 4 places it can go. Only 4 places it can go. What's in an address? So this is my name and address that somebody would normally type it. The post office doesn't want any punctuation marks, and they want it in all caps. So, and they also said, I said sans serif. Now we take out the punctuation. I can do it in upper and lowercase. It's not a requirement. It's just a suggestion. And then down in the bottom is my 12. It's actually an 11-digit zip code. Okay. It's 11 digits, but they put in an extra one that's a check digit. And so I'll show you on the next slide. We have to turn it into a barcode. This is an older barcode. I'm going to show you the newer one in a few minutes, but you can't use this one anymore, but it's all coded in and numbered. This is how it works. Again, I just show this to people for reference. You can't use it anymore. The new barcode is an intelligent mail barcode. It's non-human readable. It includes more than just the address. Does not include a person's name, just the address. And it's encoded with 4-letter combinations. They call it DAFT, D-A-F-T, a descender, an ascender, a full bar, and a tracker. And I've got them labeled right here. So this big bar is an F bar, the D is a descender bar, the A is an ascender bar, and the T is what they call a tracker. So there's 4 different bars. Because of that, they're able, so this is my address up in the left-hand corner, just typed without anything. The barcode, this is the address on the mail piece I did today to mail to me. And what I did was on my phone, okay, I basically decoded it. Now, the way it comes out of the software program is these are all the letters. This is spelling all the information. It's non-human readable. You can't make any heads or tail of that. You need their computer system to decode what that is, okay? So it's the barcode up above. It's made up of all of those letters, and they can't translate it into those bars that are up above. So what I ended up doing was I took $4.99 I spent and bought the IMBS scan or IMB Scan Pro. For $4.99 I got to check this. I have to tell you, I sweat bullets every time I do this, especially because I can't read it. I used to be able to read the old Postnet one. I could actually read the numbers and see it. So I scanned it. This is a screen capture of my name. Okay, of my barcode. Notice my name's not on there, but that's got my correct address information right up to the zip +4. The 2 digits above it are what we call the delivery point. So that's my zip +4, which makes 9, and then that's 1011. I don't have a check digit anymore. And so this is specifically what it is. This is all embedded into those lines at the top. So OEL is optical element line. I didn't have anything in it, so it's just 00. It's saying that it's going by standard mail. That's the 143 classification. It's saying that the mailer ID, this is Clemson University's mailer ID, and this is the serial number. It has to get a serial number, a unique number of the piece, my zip code, and my zip +4, my delivery point, and then my address. That's all embedded into that code, into that barcode. I think it's absolutely fascinating that they can do that. So recognizing that is just a positive thing. This is how we come up with the 11 digits. Again, the 12th digit, if you take a look, is no longer there. The first 2 digits were actually brought out in 1955. Then the next three digits were brought out in 65. Then in 75, they added the 4 digits, the zip +4. Those of us that are old enough remember that big campaign they had. And they were still having problems with the zip codes not being read right and not having good barcodes. So they came up with the 07. The 07 are the last 2 digits of your house number. So that makes it unique because there's not going to be more than 99 houses on one block. And then the last one was a check digit, and they had that from 1985 until just recently. When they went to the intelligent mail barcode, they dropped that and went back to 11 because they don't need it anymore. The check code said, let's take all of the characters. So you add up 29631126107. That adds up to 38. So what number does the next digit have to be to make it an increment of 10? In my case, it would be 2. So it reads the first 11 characters, says I expect the next character to be a 2. If it's not, then they know that the barcode didn't read right. And that was a check digit is what they called it. So that's gone. They don't use it anymore. This, by the way, is how your zip codes, if they knew in 1955 when they came up with zip code, they would never have started in New England with 0. They would have started with 1. That leading 0 is still a problem today. It's been a big problem ever since we went computerized. But that's how this country is broken up. I did think Alaska was always a lot higher than that, but I don't know. Maybe it's just the way they mapped it out. So anyhow, these are all the barcodes the post office has been using up until this year when they came up. Not this year. It became mandatory this year that they went to the intelligent barcode. So all these other barcodes are gone. They don't exist anymore. Everything that was encoded in those is encoded, all included in the intelligent mail barcode. When they first came out with it, they called it a 4-state barcode. Then everybody got confused thinking it had something to do with 4-state sorting. And then they started calling it 1 state or 1 code. And they finally said, okay, we're confusing anybody. And they came up with intelligent mail barcode. It's been like that for about 8 years now. The intelligent mail barcode, again, if you look down here on the bottom one, this one barcode replaced all of these. All of the information, this is in this 99992, that is what we call an optional address element line, optional element line. That's not there. We don't need it. Everything that's on this piece is included in that. That's how much information I showed you from that scan. All of those things were included in it, and they can also track the mail piece because of the serial number. So it's a serial number makes it a unique mail piece. So that's how it works. And this is the difference. There's a few more lines in the intelligent mail barcode than Postnet, But the fact that there's 4 different kinds of line instead of 2 different kinds of line, they're able to embed a lot more information. It's actually pretty fascinating. And then these are the different parts. So you can go back on the slide where I showed you what I scanned, but this is different parts of what makes up the Intelligent Mail barcode. This is just a basic format of where you can put your address image. Remember I told you there are 4 places to put the barcode. There's another slide that'll show that better. But this, never, ever, ever put anything in the bottom right-hand corner. The post office owns that part of your mail. If they can't read your image, they will put a little sticker on that bottom side, and then they'll inkjet a barcode on there. You put a phone number or something on there that's important, it'll get covered up. So never, ever put anything in that bottom. It's 5/8 of an inch. I think I said 3/8 earlier, but it's 5/8 of an inch, and it's basically 4 3/4 from the left. So just need to pay attention to those different issues. But this is sort of this middle area is where you can end up putting your return address. So you can your mailing address. So you got a pretty big zone, a pretty big area to make that working. These are targets that you can buy. As for this one on the bottom right, again, you put your mail piece in here, and you can see this dotted line right here. For the mail piece to be the right proportion size, the right-hand corner, when you start with it in the left-hand corner, the right-hand corner has to be in the shaded area. If it's not in that shaded area, you can't get a discount. And then there's different things that take place on these others. You just go to the post office and ask for one, and they'll give you one free. And then this is a magnifying glass. It's like a loupe, a linen tester, whatever you want to call your magnifying glass. And in the bottom of the magnifying glass, when you have it down on the light table, there's this little piece of plastic that's been printed underneath there. And you're putting this on top, and you can actually see it right next to the barcode. And you can tell that the barcode is the right thickness or the right height. There's a minimum thickness, a maximum thickness. This is how much skew it can have. It can be angled slightly. And so you put this in there, and you can tell that your QR code, that your barcode is right. I talked about tabbing. This is a real basic primer on it, right? Places to do it. And I would tell you, I wouldn't even go by this slide. This is something that changes often enough that I would actually go in anytime I was doing a mailing, and I'd make sure they didn't update the requirements. Generally, the post office updates requirements 4 times a year, every 3 months. So they do it in January, they do it in April, they do it in July, and they do it in October. So they do it 4 times a year, so 4 times a year. Not mandatory, but they do. So you just have to always keep watching that. These call them, at the post office came out with this, 9 nasties. You do any one of these 9 things, the piece of mail cannot be automated. You lose your discounts. You avoid these things with a passion. And then this is how you get discounts. You just buy the software. You buy the software and you can do this. Now the coolest part, I could do a whole night on teaching people how to use the Intelligent Mail barcode for small business. To do all the mail processing I did for the projects we do with the student, it's a free service from the United States Postal Service. Any school, any church, anybody can use that for free. It costs nothing to do it. You don't even have to have you have to have a mailing permit, but you don't have to pay the yearly maintenance fee on the mailing permit as long as you're mailing it with full service, and that is considered full service. So the reality is it's a great tool. So you got to learn how to use the software. You get the software that does this, you probably need 2 days worth of training to make sure you do it. With the Intelligent Mail barcode for small business online, probably 1 hour I could teach people how to do it. And then after you know how to do it, probably, shake through it 1 or 2 times, and then all of a sudden you'd be pretty comfortable with it. So it's a pretty good one. That's the only way I teach my students now. I don't get the real expensive software. I don't need to, and it's a little bit more user-friendly. 2 things about discount requirements. If you mail in a first class, to get your discounts in first class, you have to have at least 500 pieces. It gets delivered in 1 to 2 days. It's guaranteed. In standard mail, you can have as few as 200 pieces or 50 pounds, whichever is more. So if I had a really heavy piece, I might be able to have 150 pieces, and it would be over 50 pounds. So I'd still be able to mail it for the discount. So it's 200 or 50 pounds, whichever one you hit first. And it's going to be delivered in 2 to 9 days, except for Alaska and Hawaii. And these are the sorting discounts that you end up getting. You've heard me mention mixed ADDC. You have an 8ADC, which is an area distribution center. And then you have a 3-digit sort, which would be like the upstate of South Carolina. So anybody that has a 296, so it's just the last 2 numbers changing. So the first 3 digits, if that's a common one, that's just processed in the upstate. 5 digits is the local post office. The carrier route and the line of travel, you can only do that now for flats. You can't do it for letters anymore because they sort it by machine at the local post office level. And then these are just some other things you have to recognize is if addresses are changing, and they estimate that the post office estimates that 17% of every mailing list, if it's not updated every year, goes bad. They just look at the history, the statistics. 17% of it, the average mailing list, go bad every year. People moving, people dying, whatever. Ancillary and service endorsement is what you say if you want to get the piece returned to you. People use the wrong one and it costs them a fortune. I could do a whole lesson on just that. These are the different ancillary endorsement statements. Making sure you get the right one is really important. On the last slide, I give you a link to the Click Service Guide, and it explains what each one of these is. These are the 8 biggest reasons why mail is rejected in Merlin or any other process. It's pretty straightforward. Ancillary services aren't right. Reply mail isn't set up right. They smears. I'm not going to go through all these. They're pretty straightforward. And then this is my summary slide. Again, this is your resource slide. If you downloaded this, if you've gotten the PowerPoint PDF of it, all of these are hot. All you got to do is click on them. Once you click on them, bookmark them. And then these are my 2 gurus. I'm pretty good at mailing because I've been doing it for a while. But it was Mary Grambrell that got me help, gave me all the help here. She was amazing, just spent hours and hours with me teaching me. And then I went out to Reno. That woman let me actually take a video camera in, videotape everything. And just, I mean, I spent hours with me again. Just, I was on sabbatical, and she just let me pick her brain for the whole day. It was amazing. So they are just incredible helps. So that's the end. Good news. Get involved with the PCC, the Postal Customer Council. Make some friends. Ask for help. The people will come in and talk to your class. Ask people why you should be teaching mailing. They're all looking for people. Students think it's a dull and boring area, but my gosh, it is a huge industry. A ton of money going through there every day. When I took my students to the post office in Charlotte, and it's only one of several BMEUs, but one is their biggest BMEU, and processed 4 million pieces of mail a day. They bring in $4 million worth of postage in that one building every single day. This is big business. And you need to understand that. You need to recognize that people use it to make money. And that's what we're teaching. Everything we did today, those 3 mailings, they're all marketing mail pieces for the restaurants to sell more food and get more customers. And we did something where we replicated a case study, and we're using social media. We're using a mobile web page the students designed. And so using integrated mailing and integrated marketing makes mail more effective. Mail is still reliable, it's relatable to people, and everybody's got a mailbox. So I am a real advocate for the mail. If you ever are motivated and you even want to have me talk to your students or something one time, or get online direct, we can do that. I can help find somebody for you to talk to. There's all sorts of great people in the post office to help.
That's awesome.
Okay.
John, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge about this with our group. And there's a lot of detail, which explains why it takes an hour to get through it. So appreciate that very much. And we'll go ahead and wrap this up. Thanks, everybody, for joining us tonight.
Thanks a lot.